Okay.
Well,
So I
says
want
it's a
to,
recording.
so it says we're recording. So welcome everyone from Westport Art Group. We're inviting Greg Stone to tell us about his photography. And do you want to tell us a little first, Greg, or go right to your screen?
I'll go right to my screen when you're ready.
Okay, I think we're ready.
Hi. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can do the share screen right. In the right way. Okay, in search of our dynamic landscape. Good evening. Tonight, I'd like to share with you my evolving approach to landscape. Wait a minute, I want to move these guys. My evolving approach to landscape photography, both the hows and the whys, as well as a few rules I follow that aren't from the book, but from experience. I'll comment on each image, but then pause for several seconds so you can evaluate the image for yourself. Admittedly, my approach to landscape images benefits from good cameras, lifelong exploration of photography, plus, and this is huge, my being retired and thus having the time to go where I want, when I want. But please don't get to thinking that means only those with this kind of experience or free time or cameras can make dynamic landscape photographs. What?
It didn't work before.
As a huge game changer on the scene, the camera in your phone. I have excellent traditional cameras and I use them frequently, but you'd be surprised, I am, at how often I reach for my phone. Frequently, the images I post on Facebook or hang on the walls to exhibit come from my phone. For example, when it started snowing hard this Sunday, I reached for my phone because it was the simplest, most versatile camera I could grab, and because it can handle the threats of bad weather better than my other cameras. Good subjects and good lighting frequently happen without warning or planning, and capturing them effectively can be done with your phone. Note this phone shot, done remotely, of a red-bellied woodpecker. The key is not your equipment or amount of spare time. Photographers have often said that the best camera is the one you have with. But Ansel Adams summed it up best. He lugged around lots of heavy, complex equipment, but he knew that the key wasn't the camera. He said, the single most important component of a camera is the 12 inches behind it, and that's you. So,
You're going in the wrong direction.
I know. Sorry, but this is not.
Clicking over here, maybe do it.
Get back to where we're supposed to be. Sorry, folks. In search of our dynamic landscape. Okay, let's move right ahead. So why the great Ansel Adams said, landscape photography is the supreme test of the photographer and often the supreme disappointment. One simple answer is that we too often see and capture in our images what I call a static landscape.
No answers, and you're worried for your life.
Somebody's talking. Somebody isn't muted.
Five unaccompanied minors and the 3 infants in their.
Yeah, I can't.
Okay. I don't know if it stopped anyways.
It has stopped now. Yeah.
All right, this can especially be the case when we travel to what is generally regarded as a beautiful location. It's not that the locations we go to are not beautiful, it's that we simply see them on our timetable, which doesn't always allow us to see them at the best. In fact, what we frequently see and capture because we have no choice is what I call an empty stage. The scene before us contains the fundamental elements we see. We're just trapped by insisting that the landscape be at its best on our schedule. But nature doesn't let us do that. If we really want to see the beauty of the landscape and capture it at its best, we have to be there at the right moment. The empty stage is simply waiting for someone to shout, "Lights, camera, action." I know because I frequently begin my day in search of that place and moment. And because I've restricted my search to those locations close to home, I've slowly learned where the empty stages are, where the essential static elements are. And what I try to do is be up well before sunrise and, based on dynamic elements such as weather and tide and time of year, decide which stage I will visit that day. Sometimes I'm fortunate enough to hit just the right time. So why call it dynamic? Because it includes several elements that are in a state of constant dramatic change, and as such, add excitement and interest to the image. Change elements such as color, clouds, mist, and for good measure, a lone cormorant. Let me provide a few more examples of static landscapes. These are countless. There are countless such empty stages in and near Westport. Here are some of my favorites, starting with the Head and the Bell Schoolhouse. This is the dynamic version. Bren looked out the kitchen window one day and saw these gorgeous cumulus clouds to the north. I hopped in the car. 10 minutes later, was able to capture them at the Head. The clouds and colorful kayak make for a dynamic landscape that invites the viewer to grab a boat and head down the river. This is static. And of course, the Westport Land Conservation Trust has given us many such landscapes, free and open to the public. This is Mill Pond, with its wonderful leading line, the path, curving through a small orchard. And here's the dynamic version. Snow, a beautiful blue sky, and a man and his canine companion head up the Mill Pond Trail. The static. Forge Pond attracts ducks, geese, and other wildlife, but on a dull, overcast winter day, it just doesn't provide a dramatic landscape. But Forge Pond gives us wonderful color in October and provides a scene that's hard to resist. Brookside, Includes running water, trees, rocks, and downstream, even the remains of an old stone bridge that served a road a couple of centuries ago. Through it, Bread and Cheese Brook twists and turns its way until it flows into the East Branch.
Greg, is that the one on 177?
Yes, it is. And this is the dynamic version. Oh my, but winter does produce a wonderland landscape here. I like to catch this when the sun's pretty high and shining into it well from the south. It's static. It's hard for the wonderful old village of Westport Point not to be appealing. I frequently stop at the small parking area near the north end of the Route 88 bridge just to enjoy the view. And here's a dynamic version. But in the early morning sun, with a nice sprinkling of clouds, the scene becomes much more appealing. Oh, and walk across the highway from that parking area, and you have several delightful views of Mascosatch Point, the East Branch, and the marshes behind Horseneck Beach. This area just begs for a sunrise, as well as action on the river, and walking from the parking area across the bridge and back always provides photo ops. What I'm trying to explain here is my simple approach to nature photography, a category that runs the gamut from landscape to wildlife. I see this as a continuum where the two categories meet in the dynamic landscape. My first love was wildlife photography. In fact, I started taking digital close-ups of birds as a substitute for using a field guide. I could study the pictures at my leisure and ID the birds at home, not fumble about in the field with books and binoculars.
What is that?
I'm sorry, Barbara, what did you say?
It wasn't me, so
It's a piping plover anyways, and its baby, yeah, at Allen's Pond. This became especially important when identifying flying shorebirds, such as this flock of dunlins off Gooseberry. At that point, about a dozen years ago, I couldn't have cared less about landscape photography. In fact, when I ran into an occasional landscape photographer in my walks in field and woods, I could simply not imagine why that subject appealed to them. Needless to say, I've changed my mind. I should add that I didn't appreciate at the time how difficult landscape photography can be. Seemed to me like the landscape did all the work. You just pointed the camera. But that's the point. You don't arrange the scene, you find it and simply take advantage of what nature provides. The difficulty comes because nature is dynamic in a state of constant change. Of course, wildlife photography can test your skills as well, but often the skills being tested are ones of knowing where and when to find wildlife. The main photography challenge becomes owning a lens long enough to get you up close to your subject and reveal details most of us never see with our naked eye. But that kind of nagged at me a bit. But I still revel in making such images. For example, this past October, I was delighted when in the middle of the day, a mature bald eagle in all its glory gave me a close flyby at Adamsville Landing. I've become obsessed with other goals. First, I started moving in the direction of showing wildlife in context. And again, I still make such images as witnessed by this November photo of a handsome buck in his natural environment on the marsh on a misty November morning. That last image moved closer to one of my goals, showing nature as we see it with our naked eye. This one gets us closer still. It really begins to put the landscape into view. However, if you took the two deer out of this picture, it would make just a so-so landscape. The subject is clearly the deer, not the landscape. Here, the context takes on even more importance, for it shows the hunting style, the hunting environment for a marsh hawk, the northern harrier, and how it tends to glide slowly, closely following the contour of the land. But the result is certainly not a landscape photo. But let's return to the empty stage, for that's where the landscape photo begins. As with all photos, what I'm seeking is the right subject, the right light, and the right composition. This little cove is prominent from the parking area just before the Route 88 bridge. It's often the first place I stop in the morning. Go back to it. There we go. But of course, I hope it will look more like this when I get there. Look at the major dynamic elements: lighting, clouds, reflections, and of course, colors. All photos involve these three basic critical elements: subject, lighting, and composition. Usually one of these three dominates. Essentially, without that dominant element, you don't have much of a photo. This is certainly true of dynamic landscapes. Of the three elements, the one I think is often most difficult to define is subject. I mean, many times it's ridiculously obvious, but it can also be very perplexing, involving something very subjective, such as mood, serenity, excitement, meditative. Subject? Well, here the subject is obvious. A lone black crowned night heron sitting on a rock in Gray's Mill Pond. And again, subject, double rainbow, really. What else could the subject be? How dull would this landscape be without it? This is looking over Buzzards Bay, by the way, from Gooseberry. Subject here, and the sunrise, the fisherman launching his kayak at Gooseberry Ramp, or is it really about solitude? And again, you can say the subject is kayaking at dawn, but I see this as a mood picture. solitude, yes, but with that red sky and perhaps a hint of danger and adventure. So what is the subject here? Breakfast time for the great egots might mean something to some viewing this picture. But the dominant color here is yellow. And I got thinking about that and I asked Google for the meaning of the color yellow. Here's what I found. Yellow, the lightest hue of the spectrum, signifies joy, happiness, betrayal, optimism, caution, idealism, imagination, hope, sunshine, summer, gold, philosophy, dishonesty, cowardice, jealousy, covetousness, deceit, illness, hazard, and friendship. All I can say is, huh? Yeah, okay. So we can't rely on yellow meaning anything. We can rely on it meaning everything. The dominant green here, that speaks of life. The bench welcomes the viewers to take a seat and be contemplative. So the best I can do for subject here is to say a beautiful view of a meadow, marsh, and river. Or is it simply a prime seat? This is at the town farm, by the way. So do I actually think of these things when I'm making a picture? Sometimes. But mostly my picture is simply an intuitive response to a scene, not a conscious, rational one where I'm weighing such things as the meaning of a dominant color, though that may come later as I edit the image. So subject, well, how small we are, how absolutely important the sun is. Lighting has been a major learning experience for me. It is always in a state of change, though some changes are very predictable, at least in broad terms. Major factors include the time of year and the time of day, of course. Near dawn and dusk, you have low-angle sunlight producing strong shadows, but what also changes at such times is the color of the light, so that surrounding sunrise and sunset, we have what is called the golden hour because of the warm color of the light. We also have some special situations at specific times, such as the blue hour. And a favorite phenomenon about 10 minutes before sunrise and after sunset that involves a rose-colored band in the sky opposite the sun, as well as a blue band near the horizon that is the shadow of the earth. This last is a good example of something that changes rapidly. And while these phenomena are driven by position of the sun, they're highly dependent on the atmospheric conditions as well. So lighting. This scene of Westport Point includes the red band in the western sky shortly before sunrise in the east. This is called the belt of Venus, and the blue beneath it is the shadow of the earth. As you can see, both these colors are picked up by the reflective surface of snow and water. Lighting. Now, here's a more dramatic example of that same phenomena. In this instance, looking east shortly after sunset as a full moon rises embedded in the earth's shadow. This is, of course, from Gooseberry, a great place to watch the sunset in the west any day, but especially interesting when paired with a full moon rising in the east. This is a supermoon rising in the east in the Earth's shadow shortly after sunset. Look for this sky color phenomena in the east during the 10 minutes after the sun has set in the west. Or look for it in the west in the 10 minutes before the sun rises in the east. Is supermoon setting in the west in the Earth's shadow shortly before sunrise. And yes, this is the same supermoon seen in the previous image, but this is the next morning. And of course, we have the belt of Venus, etc. Lighting again, and this is the blue hour. It's a special time based on how far the sun is below the horizon. At that time, much of the red is filtered out of the light, and the sky takes on an intense blue, not seen at any other time of the day. The app, Photo Pills, told me that on this particular day, the blue hour would begin at 6:40 a.m. This picture was made at 6:43 a.m. and the blue hour was replaced by the golden hour about 10 minutes later. So it's a rather short hour indeed.
So how long does that usually take or last?
It is short. It's usually in that 10 to 15-minute range around here, but it depends on where you are on the planet and what your latitude is and what time of year it is. It's all based on the position of the sun below the horizon.
Thanks.
You're welcome. This is another day looking towards Westport Point from Route 88 during the blue hour. At other times, the rising or setting sun can create a simpler, more obvious accent to add drama to a picture or call attention to certain features. Lighting, of course, the most dramatic and common thing that the low sun interacts with is the clouds. Their colors are often picked up in reflecting surfaces such as water and snow. But the color of the light changes the color of other parts of the scene, though this may be more subtle. This is looking north from Hicks Bridge during a summer dawn. Another beautiful spot. And once more, when watching a sunrise or sunset, no matter how dazzling the sky may be, I constantly remind myself to look around a full 360 degrees. And don't just look at the sky. Look at what that soft golden light is doing to near objects, such as the trunks of these trees at Allen's Pond. And don't forget the wildlife. Look at the way the long, low-angled morning sun catches this gull in flight. Did someone turn a spotlight on Westport Point? You bet. It's called the rising sun. And it seems particularly intense in this shot because it was shining through a clear slit along the eastern horizon, while the rest of the sky was heavily overcast, a darkness reflected in the water as well. And by the way, this lasted only about 10 or 15 seconds at this intensity. Notice how the intensity, angle, and color of the morning light changes different aspects of the scene in this panorama of Adamsville Landing. Okay, composition. I seldom have a shot where I think composition dominates, though I feel I pay attention to it in every shot. Essentially, I try to follow, or I should say, start with one or two of the basic rules, such as the rule of thirds, or leading lines, or fill the frame. But I usually end up returning to the one overriding rule Ansel Adams provides. There are no rules for good photographs. There are only good photographs. That said, traditional composition rules do give us useful guidance. That is, they frequently provide a good starting point. And for landscape, what follows are a few additional rules of my own. My first rule is start with the sky. The sky is a major part of the landscape. I learned this from a comet hunter named Leslie Peltier, who wrote about how, as a child a century ago, he was scolded by a teacher when he insisted that we live in the earth, not on it. And we do indeed live in a sea of air, and it's very much a part of our planet. I find this tree a worthy subject, but it's enhanced by the fascinating sky surrounding it. This is at Slocum River Reserve, by the way, in Dartmouth.
So is that using a fisheye?
No, but it is, well, I don't remember. I could have been fooling around with one on the iPhone, because it certainly is distorted the way a super wide angle would distort it. Okay, the sky spices up this drone shot looking north up the East Branch from above our backyard. That's Hicks Bridge in the middle. So while I frequently go out before sunrise, what really governs most of my hunts for a dynamic landscape is what is going on in the sky, regardless of the time of day. It's the single most decisive factor that turns a static landscape into a dynamic one. Okay, my second rule, foreground prominence. I really enjoyed doing this. My second compositional rule is to give the foreground a significant role in the image. This frequently leads to a foreground object dominating a part of the picture, or even framing the whole picture.
Is that gooseberry?
It certainly is. So is this. This gooseberry sunbed makes use of the strong color elements of the foreground and midground, beach roses, to echo the distant, vibrant colors of the setting sun. A breaking wave over Bar Rock near the Gooseberry Causeway is paired here with the setting supermoon. This is another planned shot where photo pills allowed me to anticipate this exact alignment and be in the right place at the right time. Of course, photo pills didn't tell me a wave was going to hit the rock, but
So that, Greg, that's an app you can get for your phone, this photo pills?
It's an app. I think it costs $10 these days. I'm not sure, but it contains an incredible amount of photographic information, but particularly I like it because it allows you to find something as specific as this. That is, when I stand on the causeway, exactly where on the causeway should I stand in order to get the moon in line with Bar Rock.
So do you use GPS coordinates or on a map?
Do you use GPS coordinates or on a map?
Well, it's on your phone and you have a map. You can use GPS coordinates about where you are at any given moment, but you basically have a map and you move a pin around on the map to where you want to be, and you see the locations of things like moonrise, moonset, sunrise, sunsets. It's very useful.
It sounds it.
Again, foreground prominence, this shot made where the East Branch enters Forge Pond is framed by the foreground on the left, but is something of a metaphor for autumn as well, with a falling leaf in the foreground. This was very deliberate and took several tries before I actually captured a leaf in free fall. And here the subject is really the foreground object, a beautiful wild blue flag iris, which is native to North America, but I still see this essentially as a landscape shot of Forge Pond. All right, my third basic rule, connect with the universe. I remain very conscious of the movement of major celestial objects, sun, moon, Milky Way, and the bright planets, Venus and Jupiter, and whenever possible, try to show them as an integral to our landscape. This alignment of the rising sun with the old road behind the dunes at Horseneck, which leads from the center of, sorry about that, leads from the center of the beach to the campground, occurs in early January, and again about 6 months later. No, I didn't use photo pills to predict this. I do know some of these things just from experience, but photo pills would be useful. The sun, our star, is absolutely essential to all life on Earth, and so featured in many landscapes. This path leading from the Gooseberry parking lot to the beach makes a nice alignment with the rising sun when we're near the winter solstice. Again, connecting with the universe. When you see a starburst like this one, it's a byproduct of the shutter leaves in a camera lens. But I find it a good way to express the overwhelming brilliance of the sun, which is always a danger to eyes and camera. I take such pictures very quickly and with care to protect my eyes, seldom actually looking through the camera. What I would do is I would align my view to the right of the sun or to the left of the sun, take my eye away from the camera, and then move the camera and take the picture and hope.
And that's down on River Road. I recognize the little bridge.
Yeah, that's River Road, right? That's the herring run that goes from the pond to the river. Again, connecting with the universe, this is a solar pillar over the East Branch at dawn. They're relatively rare, the result of ice crystals falling through the air and catching the rays of the sun. And this one combines my love of turning close-ups into landscape photos of a sort, in this case, catching the sun in the image with the rhododendrons. This is a personal favorite because of the marking of a new day with the rising sun and with a shell fisherman heading off to work up the river. The clouds and waves combine to form a corridor for the action. What can I say? As a picture spot, varied wildlife environment, it's hard to beat Adamsville Landing. But again, the critical point here for me is to integrate earth and sun, to keep reminding myself that we're a small part of a huge, intimately interconnected system. Not too long ago, it was quite difficult and very equipment intensive to capture a decent shot of the Milky Way. But this is a 10-minute exposure in my backyard, done simply with the Samsung S23 Ultra phone camera on a conventional camera tripod. And cemeteries are not my favorite subject, but the mist adds a spiritual tone here, and the rising sun a suggestion of rebirth. So I couldn't resist. I stopped, walked around a bit, and did my best to capture an effective balanced composition. Again, connecting with the universe, sun, mist, and grass, light, water, and green energy, all basic to life. Well, yes, humans enter into the picture. I gave up fishing long ago when, as a child, I had to clean all I caught. But it is a life-affirming activity. This is Saudi Pond near sunset with a waxing moon in the sky. Again, integration of we as humans with the greater universe. And for the record, none of my people shots are posed. People are, of course, simply another part of nature. I love the starry night, but the professionals with huge telescopes and telescopes in space can outdo us every time when it comes to great astrophotos. So my goal is simpler. I want to show the stars and the surrounding landscape pretty much as we see them with the naked eye. Have I mentioned how tiny the moon and sun are? Maybe I haven't. Well, here it is. The moon in particular plays a psychological game of hide and seek with us, appearing much larger when full and near the ground, only to shrink in shyness when we point the camera at it. This is the town farm. Serendipity, which is no rule at all, it just happens. I mean, sometimes you just get lucky. The moon and sun are incredibly light, but as I said earlier, very small targets in our sky. They make a big impression on our eye, but cover just half a degree. It would take 360 moons like this one to form a trail across the sky from horizon to horizon. So you have to be lucky to catch a bird or plane aligning with it. This shot was made one morning from the middle of the Route 88 bridge. And the serendipity, yes. This beautiful doe greeted me one morning from the top of the mound near the entrance to the Allen's Pond parking area. She watched as I stopped, rolled down the window, and got this image. And it was just good luck that as I turned into the main Horseneck parking area near sunset one day, these folks were having fun on top of a dune. No, one is standing on his head. So this too is a drive-by shooting. Stop, roll down the window, click the shutter. You can, however, give Lady Luck a better chance if you anticipate certain possibilities. In this case, I was on a deeply shaded woodland path that I knew was about to open into a sun-drenched cornfield at Dunham's Brook. So I paused to reset my camera for possible action in bright sunlight. And as I stepped into the open, the deer obliged. Okay, my fifth rule, all weather photography. My mother used to bring out her camera only on a bright sunny day. In those days, small, inexpensive cameras really only worked in bright sunlight. And it took a long while for me to fully explore the idea that with modern cameras, any weather can yield wonderful photo opportunities. This is Allen's Pond. Driving in a snowstorm is dangerous, so I don't want to encourage people to take chances. But I find certain conditions hard to resist. This is the view from Hicksbridge Landing, less than 2 miles from our home. For me, the biggest challenge in photographing a snowstorm is catching the actual falling snow. It takes some fiddling with exposure and with the various editing controls to bring it out. I must admit, I simply love the street lamps in Adamsville. They can give any picture a bit of a feel of early 20th century America. This is looking down Hotel Hill at the point. Makes me want to abandon the car and get a toboggan. Problem is you'd end up crossing Route 88. That could be a serious problem. See the stoplights at the bottom? Just barely. What I like best is not photographing the actual storm, but getting out in time to catch images of the snow before it gets all tracked up, or worse yet, gets dirty with grit thrown up or down by the plows. Ice storms are my ideal. And no, I don't wish for them any more than I wish for hurricanes. But if they come, I want to photograph them. I've only caught a few. I still remember the first I photographed extensively more than 50 years ago. This is at the town farm. Of course, with any storm, my first choice is to get to the coast. These days, that's more difficult as police, understandably, now tend to shut down the roads nearest Gooseberry where this was taken. That said, sometimes the best shots can be found closest to home. This after the storm shot was made from the end of my driveway, looking across the road.
And it's lovely.
It's lovely.
Thank you. No rule here. This is just the kind of thing that makes it fun to be up with the sun. In this case, I arrived at the Nubble and immediately saw this pair atop a rock watching the sunrise. I didn't want to disturb them, but I circled behind them, taking one picture after another, seeing nothing more than what you see here. When I got home, brought up the shadows in that image with the Lightroom editing software, I discovered the truth. It wasn't two people, one was a dog. What's more, the dog moved its body to follow me intensely as I circled behind the pair. What a handsome companion. So that's it, folks. Good luck to all of you. Hope you have many encounters with more dynamic landscapes.
Well, thank you. And anybody who wants to unmute themselves and ask a question, you're welcome to do it. And I also want to tell everyone that we're planning on having Greg do a photography class for us at Westport Art Group, probably sometime in April. So look for it. But thank you, Greg. The
Yeah.
photos were just wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Enjoy it very much.
Thank you, Greg.
Welcome.
Love your iPhone pictures now, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Enlightening to say the least.
Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you very much. Very,
Yeah.
very honored.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glad you
And
could all be here.
And I have one question, because you said you took one that was the Milky Way with a Samsung. Do you usually use an iPhone or a Samsung?
I usually use the iPhone. I think the iPhone is more versatile. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the star photos, I find I can handhold the iPhone and get the kind of photo I want that shows the naked eye stars. When I use the Samsung, it's great for the Milky Way, but if I go out and take a picture of let's say Orion or something, it really shows a lot of stars that I think just confuse people.
Well, the photos were wonderful. I love that I know where most of those are.
Most of them
Yep.
are.
Thank you.
Excuse me, I have a question for Greg. Greg, the pictures that you
Yes.
showed us, were they mostly done on the iPhone? Like what was the percentage? Because they're so beautiful.
The pictures that you showed them, were most of them done with the iPhone, or do you have a percentage of how many were iPhone?
I haven't a clue. I couldn't tell you without looking at the, EXIF data, the data that records what it was taken with and when. I just don't notice the difference visually when I'm looking for pictures, to use here, for example. I have thousands of photos, so I go through and just sort of pick them on the basis of what will convey the message I'm trying to convey. And I don't pay attention to whether it's iPhone or one of the other cameras.
Well, thank
The
you.
i-
It was a
the-
lovely presentation.
Wait, I have a question. How do we find you on Facebook?
Greg Stone. Just
So
go
there-
to
There are a lot
Facebook
of
and
things.
search for Greg Stone and look
There
for
are a-
look for the one from Westport. Well, you can put my email address in there. That is, if you search on a person's email address, Greg Stone #2 @gmail.com. Greg Stone, all one word, #2 gmail.com. Then
Perfect.
you'll get my Facebook page.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we had one other question in the chat.
Mhm.
Sue Bailey, the lighting is gorgeous. Are you a morning person naturally?
The lighting is gorgeous. Are you a morning person naturally?
Yeah, I'm a more, I had a morning paper route that I had to deliver before I caught the 7:30 school bus. So I had to be up early and I never got out of the habit.
Well, it's serving you well for photography.
Oh, it's fun. And I always wanted something to do. When I'm up in the morning and other people aren't. And I used to do a lot of astronomy at that time, but I've shifted to photography, which I've done all my life, but not as intensely as I'm doing it now.
Well, thank you very much and good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Bravo. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Night.
Mhm.